a podcast by Vision Point Marketing. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Rock Enroll, the enrollment marketing podcast hosted by Vision Point Marketing. I'm Dana Cruikshank, Vice President and Senior Strategist here at Vision Point, and I am joined today by Leslie Sharpe, one of our newest marketing strategists here, and dare I say, another higher ed lifer as well. So, Leslie, I appreciate you joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so Leslie, I know you've been with Vision Point just a little under a year now, I guess, right? Is that about right? I'm trying to think.
Just a few months, just a few months.
Okay.
I've
One of
been
those
here.
situations where I feel like you've been here a long time. So
Yeah, I told my supervisor just recently. I said I feel like I just got here, and I also feel like I've been here forever. So I'm living in that time is not real scenario right now, but it's been a really great start for sure.
that's great. And tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're coming from, and your experience here in this crazy world we call higher education recruiting and marketing.
Yeah. So I started thinking, I was going to be in kind of a traditional college higher education setting forever. Didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I think, like most people, when they start in higher ed, knowing that I wanted to do something with student transitions, landed in the Office of Admissions, running a campus tour program. That's where I started my graduate program. And this was at Old Dominion University. And then started working full time, ran the campus tour program, ran the special events program. So everything from open house to admitted students day, scholars day, programs like that. And then had an amazing supervisor at the time who had a background in the traditional marketing agency world and really took me under her wing and folded me into admissions marketing. And so kind of just moved through and up and eventually oversaw kind of all of that area. So marketing for undergraduate, graduate, and international admissions, as well as still overseeing a welcome center, campus tours, and those special events. And
Wow.
I did that for about 8 years.
Okay.
And this is my first role off of a college campus.
Wow. Okay, that is great. So, well, you and I have a fair amount in common then, because I also came to Vision Point after about 7 years of working at another institution in Virginia on the other side of the state from, or I should say, the other side of the Commonwealth, uh, from Old Dominion at Virginia Tech. So definitely know, but not. I got to be honest. I only had to handle continuing professional education. You had the gamut there, welcome centers and so forth. That's fascinating. Yeah, just kind of curious. We are recording this just a couple of days after Labor Day. Most folks are now, even in the Midwest, where they start a little late. Everyone's kind of in full swing on the traditional undergrad side and so forth. But so I know one of the things that's interesting, I guess we all as human beings get habituated to 12 years at least of getting ready for school in the fall and just having this feeling of like, oh, I need to go buy a new binder, Trapper Keeper for the win, by the way. But and new school supplies, as soon as we get close to Labor Day and the end of summer. But for those of us who worked in higher ed for a while, the end of summer, beginning of fall, just kind of it's like your body is just enumerated to start doing some stuff. So, given that this is your first fall not working at an institution in quite a while, what are your defaults right now in your brain in terms of what you want to be focusing on?
Yeah, it is so strange. I've been seeing all of my coworkers posting for move-in and campus kind of getting lively again. But this is the time in admissions that we would have just kind of sent our counselors out on the road. So typically, like second week of August is when our admissions counselors start their travel. So summer. Usually, I think for admissions folks can feel a little bit like a downtime, but in the marketing space, it's prepping all of those materials for the counselors to take out on the road. So I would probably be crossing my fingers that all of our print materials got here in time, but really just starting the year, getting those materials out, having our counselors starting to recruit, getting those campus visitors for those fall special events and campus tours, as well as starting that beginning planning for all those large special events and tours. And September is usually kind of a slow time as far as visits as students go back to school, but October, it's full speed ahead. So this is preparation time in admissions offices for sure.
Well, that's great. I know I know back when you were at ODU, that institution, Old Dominion University, for those who aren't aren't quite as familiar, I know a lot of us have been really impressed in seeing that as like an institution on the rise, and also just seeing that he really bucked a lot of enrollment trends across the past few years. It's been quite impressive in that regard. So, talk to me about maybe some of the changes to that start of the year cadence that you saw just in your 8 years at ODU.
Yeah, I mean, the size of the events, the amount of visitors that we saw really changed. We opened a welcome center, gosh, I guess it's 2 years ago now. So that was part of the area that I oversaw. And so even just having a different location to welcome visitors in really changed. And the amount of offerings, I think as every institution shifted with COVID, instead of just making our events larger, we realized that guests really wanted these intimate boutique visits. And so the volume of visits were just totally different. I mean, I remember 5 years ago, it was campus tours, open house, admitted students day, scholars day. That's it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's prepping for a whole different situation now. It was, we did a just for locals tour, transfer tours, individual academic college visits and tours, almost like miniature academic open houses, financial aid sessions. And then Old Dominion University has a huge first generation Pell eligible population. And so I think even more so, we wanted to provide more resources for those students after COVID who maybe had that gap. So lots and lots of programming, and the numbers didn't change. We had smaller visits, but just more frequently. So totally different landscape than a few years ago, for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting to me. Like, I feel like we've seen a lot of these trends that you're talking about kind of track with really the rise of just a change in customer experiences. And I wonder to the extent of which, coming out of the pandemic, because you helped the ODU team, you were a vital part of leading the ODU team in that kind of pandemic response, where, again, really bucked a lot of the trends in enrollment during that time. How did those plans shift a little bit coming out of COVID?
Yeah. So first, I have to say what was happening during COVID with our programming. When I think about what was put on, it blows my mind. I mean, there was a significant team in place, and I'm thankful for them. I mean, I'm thinking of an incredible assistant director, top of mind, and everything she did. But we were walking around with camcorders on moving carts, doing like facility tours of buildings and doing live, almost living rooms style kind of Q&As with campus partners. And so it really pushed us to get creative. And we took that into our traditional programming. The other piece is, I think, coming out of COVID, we thought, okay, well, now we're going to go back to normal. And as the rest of the world realized, no, we can never go back. So it was, okay, we have to provide all these virtual offerings and in-person offerings, and that required more manpower. So, I mean, before I left, my team grew significantly. Our virtual engagement was really extensive, along with our on-campus offerings, and our platforms changed a lot too. So there's a lot of partners that we partnered with, like Student Bridge or Zeme, that students really interact with on high levels that, we were not even thinking about pre-COVID, and that all takes management. It's a lot of platform management. It's a lot of programming. So I just felt like we had to touch every base after COVID.
Yeah, that makes quite a bit of sense. And it's interesting what you just said. If I'm hearing right, that a lot of those so-called sort of transition tactics and approaches and changes and additions have just become kind of permanent coming out of COVID now.
Absolutely. I mean, you think that maybe it's going to shift one way or the other, but really it was just more touch points. And I think we really started to look at the student journey a little bit more intentionally of, okay, by the time they come to this tour, maybe by the time they come to this event, they've already interacted with us virtually 3-4 times. Maybe it's not just an email anymore. It's hearing from a student on Zeme. It's sitting in on one of our Instagram lives. And so creating unique experiences in that journey and making it feel really intentional through storytelling was a huge piece too, is, okay, how can we make all of these experiences different? Because they're everywhere. Students are finding the information. They're going to find out what they need to know, whether they come for a campus visit or not. So we just wanted to make sure we were checking all the boxes.
That totally makes sense. I guess just kind of putting on the strategy hat for a minute here. You mentioned ZME and Student Bridge and some other, these are wonderful tools, by the way. But there's a lot of potential tools out there. And we hear more and more about like, well, especially now that so many folks are short staffed in admissions and marketing offices, oh, we could use automation, we could use tools, we can use all these other things together. How do you know you're using the right tools for your institution? Because there are so many options out there now. But from a strategy perspective, how do you know these investments are worth it and these investments aren't?
Yeah, I mean, ROI, right? Return on investment. How many of these students who are engaging are attending or coming for the campus visit? How many clicks are you getting? And I think no matter what service or vendor or whatever you're using, whether it's through your CRM or whether it's through one of these kind of external platforms, making sure that you're looking at that data. I think that making informed decisions really is the key, because we got to a place too, maybe a year or so after fully doing in-person events, that we looked at all of our platforms, one, realizing, whoa, we're spending a ton of money, right? We're spending a ton of money. And is all of our money in the right places? So I think after a year, just looking back, seeing how many of those students actually confirmed, and before you sign on again for another year, making sure that you are getting the results that you need from the vendor, right? Making sure that they're providing the data and analytics back to you and providing those proof points, not broad, but really specific in general. I think a huge key too is the integration into your CRM is huge. I mean, if a platform that we were considering couldn't integrate with our CRM, that was kind of a no-go for us. We had one that didn't, and we couldn't evaluate it, whether it was successful or not. So I think just really doing your research, making sure that the return on investment is there, and that it's driving either clicks, it's driving traffic to your site, or those students are getting confirmed.
Tell me more about that. Like, why is that CRM integration so crucial with the tools? Because it almost sounds like the CRM becomes sort of the benchmark tool upon which you build everything else out of.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, your CRM tool is so powerful, right? It's, of course, I think the first thing people think of is, it's storing all your contacts. It has the capability to automate communication, but it can track really big things too, right? How many visits does a student take to campus? What are they doing after that visit? After how many visits does it take for them to apply? After how many visits does it take for them to confirm? If you have an app like, I mentioned ZME, which is a great tool, you have to make sure that you have the right data to be able to make that resource useful, right? Because what we were able to do, and we did this with a number of our outside vendors, is to say, okay, as soon as a certain student accepts or a student applies, they're getting triggered communication, right? Hey, meet us on ZME. Or as soon as they're accepted, it's saying, hey, meet us on ZME. And so none of that communication would be possible without a strong CRM. And then we were able to directly see, okay, this amount of students who were engaged on ZME versus students who were not engaged on ZME were more likely to confirm or enroll, right? So it gave us more proof points. It made us, it made the dollar more valuable. But yeah, it 100% all starts with that CRM.
That is fascinating. We talk about ROI as well across, what do you think are some of the challenges that folks are facing when it comes to trying to figure out not just the ROI of specific tools, but also thinking about, what is the ROI on marketing tactics and so forth?
This is a great question. I mean, the question that I asked myself, I felt like constantly in my role before, but I think it's difficult because this generation is changing so quickly. And I think that's the conversation everyone's having, right? Students are constantly changing. But I think understanding that you have to change year to year and being okay with that, right? Like I can be totally bought in and invested in one service or one idea or one marketing strategy that I thought was incredible. And maybe it worked this year and the next year it may not work. So it's being flexible and understanding that the class is changing, especially again with these post-COVID, this post-COVID population. They're operating completely different than students we've seen in the past. They're engaging in a totally different way. So you have to be flexible. A great example of that is the admissions packet, right? So many universities now are throwing the admissions packet out. That's so much money on print materials. There's so much money on, gifts, things that we put in it, right? And so when I was at ODU, we transitioned from like this really, really extensive, thorough admissions packet that had everything from how to register for a meal plan and how to apply for housing and all of that. We found by the end of the year, whether it's staffing changes, whether it's university changes, most of that information was inaccurate by the time the year came around. And so it's rethinking, right? Do we need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on print materials when ultimately our students are confirming online, they're engaging with us online? And how can we reallocate that money for a really special, meaningful experience that connects with the student in this current generation?
When you're thinking about just that level of engagement that students are looking for, and how we previously talked about how we felt like there was a focus in those areas in COVID, but that is not, it is now the way it's going to be kind of forever. What would you say to kind of colleagues, peers, and so forth across the admissions world? Maybe their deans, maybe their VPs and so forth are telling them like, oh, well, we can't get rid of that. That feels really scary. Maybe it's that admissions packet. Maybe it's something else. What is the right approach to the conversations that lead to us being able to make those changes that can be a little scary to the institution?
Yeah, data. That's the magic piece. Typically, when you have someone in a leadership role, especially on the enrollment side, if they're high up in enrollment, they're playing a numbers game. Deans are a little bit different if it's for an academic college or things like that. I think you have to approach them a little differently and get really specific with their outcomes and the benefits that they'll have. But I think one is doing market research, seeing what national trends are, seeing what your competitors are doing is huge. I think that can be really can really resonate with leadership when they see their competitors doing something. I think higher ed can be very reactive, right? We see that school do it, so then we're going to do it. And I think leadership is more likely to react in that way. But the data is that sweet spot, that piece. And that goes back to the importance of the CRM. We were able to make big changes with programs, with our print pieces, with everything by saying, hey, this is how many times a student has interacted on this platform. This is, how many times a student has confirmed before receiving their admissions packet. Right. So that really showed, saying, hey, what is the benefit of this, and how can we set ourselves apart in the market space to say we're doing something unique and different and on trend. So following all those national organizations like Chronicles of Higher Ed, or even outside marketing platforms can be really beneficial to figuring out kind of what's on the rise and being at the forefront of that. But it's tricky. You also have to figure out what hill you're going to die on, right? And sometimes I had to let things go and say, okay, I'm going to keep asking. But there are things that I asked for 2-3 years in a row that I got a no, and then I got a yes. So keep asking, keep collecting those data points. And typically, if you have the numbers behind it, they'll see the light.
It's fascinating. You talked about like being able to see some fun tactics that are out there. What are some of the more fun tactics that you've seen? Maybe ones that you've been able to implement, but also, just some things you've seen peers do. Where you're like, that's so cool. I love that. What's got you excited these days?
I got a good one.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, so there's a lot. I think you learn a lot when you go to conferences, and we had some colleagues go to a conference right before I left and came back. And something that was really unique is, the visit experience and what students are looking for when they come to campus. And there was a university who did an admitted students day, which is typically a huge day for most schools. And they took out the academic piece completely. They completely made it about connection. They made it fun. It was almost like a summer camp day on campus. And this is with thousands of people. You know, this wasn't just some tiny school in the middle of nowhere. This is saying, hey, the focus for this event is about building connection. And they had lots of other programming throughout the year that focused on professors and focused on the academic colleges and focused on the majors. And that's not what this event was for. This event was for, I'm going to make this student feel like they belong here. They have a place here. They have friends here. And I think, again, it goes back to thinking about what this generation wants. You know, they want this connection. They want to feel like they belong. I mean, I guess that's everybody, but they've learned a lot of information by the time they've actually stepped foot on campus. And so they're really looking for a feeling by the time that they get there. So I think the way that people are rethinking the campus visit experience in general has been really, really fascinating. And I think the other big thing that you mentioned it too, with like the email communication and drip campaigns with CRMs, is like people are automating things now in a totally different way and having really specific, really dynamic communication, right? Very personalized to a student's interests, their major, what they're involved in, that really can take a student on a journey that says, oh, wow, this university really wants me. And not only do they want me, but they know me. And so just there's a lot there, depending on what CRM tool that you have, that can give a really personalized experience in a way that I've not really seen done before.
That's very cool. Okay, so we've talked about new tools and new approaches and new tactics, all really exciting stuff. But let me ask you, when it comes to enrollment and enrollment marketing and admissions and so forth, what are some things that you think are just tried and true, like just things that will never change, things that will always be important in this profession?
Yeah, counselors on the road. I think no matter what, you know, I think there was a mix for a while, and I think it's still a mix of some schools doing virtual visits and on-campus visits. I think maybe the high school visit has changed a little bit over time, but having a counselor travel in an area advocating for that school, I mean, it doesn't matter if it was 8 years ago or 1 year ago, you know, students were coming for that campus visit saying, I'm here because I had a really meaningful connection with a admissions counselor that I met at my school or at an event, who said, you know, I've never even heard of this school before, right? I didn't even know this was an option until I made that connection. So that person-to-person connection is huge. The other thing is the campus visit. No matter how much virtual engagement they have, no matter what tools they're on, they're going to want to come for a campus visit. They're going to want to see it for themselves. Maybe they're coming with a different amount of information, but making that connection for the actual campus visit is still huge. And that's what our counselors are on the road doing, right? That's their goal by the end of travel season is, you know, maybe they're not convincing a student to apply, but they're convincing a student to visit, right? And see if it's the right fit. Those connections that they have with the campus ambassadors, maybe with an admissions counselor when they come on campus, those are going to be the real reasons why a student chooses to actually attend a university. What pushes them before that point, you know, can be a number of things, but that campus visit, in my eyes, will always be the number one thing that is a deciding factor for a student choosing where to attend. I don't foresee that going anywhere. And for a while, print mail, you know, like I mentioned, we took away the admissions packet, but we still have parents and families. So whether it's a postcard, whether it is just something letting a parent or family member know that this school is out here and they're interested in your student, for a long time, I think that's still going to be there while we still have the population of parents that we do. So I don't see print direct mail going anywhere right now in the near future.
You know, it's fascinating you say that because we have been hearing that from I talk to institutions every week, institutions we work with at Vision Point and lots that we don't. And I'm hearing that across all of higher ed. It doesn't matter if it's traditional undergrad, community colleges, graduate programs, all continuing professional ed. They're all saying the same thing. that it isn't okay, now we replace everything with a digital experience. It's our digital and automated prospective student funnels, all that work, that has to be so on point. And we have to do these other things now too. The things that we were always doing before, like you said, campus visits, huge. Uh, uh, Print material, still very valid when done right. It could be a very expensive tactic if you're doing it the old way, but you do it done right, it's still tremendous value add. Yeah, and it's funny. I was talking to a graduate admissions counselor last week about their international admissions and how vital it is to be back out there on the road in person, even though they have plussed up their virtual presence to an extent that virtual experience tours and so forth, and getting a lot of value out of that, still need that in-person area. All of which just brings one thing in mind, having worked in this space directly at an institution, is like, wow, that's just more work at a time when we have fewer people. So for folks who are feeling like, hey, I am just burned out, I'm being expected to do so much more now with fewer people, stagnant, maybe even smaller budgets, pressures on more than ever, I'm out. What advice do you have to colleagues who might be feeling that way right now?
Yeah, I would say, one, I feel, yeah, we lived in that space, and it's, I don't foresee that changing again anytime soon. It's hard. I think really looking at where you're spending your money is huge. Reallocating money, outsourcing, and figure out, do we actually need this position? Is this something that we can hand over to a company that can do this better? Also give us industry insight, knowledge in a way that we just don't have our hands on fully, was huge for us. I think looking at some of the things that you've done in the past, again, those like print pieces, and sometimes you do things the same way for so long that you're not looking at the dollar amount maybe as intentionally as you should be, and saying, wow, we've spent $10,000 on this, or we've spent $20,000 on this. Is this something that we can reallocate in a different way? And relying on campus partners is huge too, right? We found out that we were doing so much double work. Sometimes we would show up to events and there would be another academic college there recruiting for the same event. And so strong communication across campus is huge, is key. Using your on-campus resources to figure out how you all can support each other, not necessarily create more work for each other, but support each other with resources that you already have in place. But that reallocation of money, figuring out, do we really need to fill this position? Maybe we get rid of this position and pay some of our employees more. And we did that a number of times to say, okay, let's raise the salaries and retain the employees that we have, give them a little bit more bandwidth, and keep them here a little bit longer. So there's a number of ways to do it, but really we outsourced a lot, and that helped tremendously. We were doing all of our mailing in-house, all of our mailing with, we had a full-time staff member mailing in-house. That fell under my umbrella. And then we started doing it out of the Welcome Center. And then we said, you know what? Let's just not fill this position. We'll do small mail pieces in-house, but we outsource the rest. And that was, it changed our quality work life for sure.
Yeah, no, mailing work. And it is interesting how things have changed. I remember even 20 years ago, that was a significant staff, and a lot of times like capital equipment investment too, to make those things done. It's so much easier to be done. It's so much easier to outsource now. One final question actually that I wanted to kind of think of. I think our last question there is a good wrap up, but I do want to say I'm just curious about visitor center and welcome centers. So and so I'll start as a question here. So thinking about welcome centers, I'm really glad you mentioned that. I feel like, because I do a lot of campus tours, I go to a lot of welcome centers, and most of them are wonderful. But I feel like I have seen a change, a real transformation, much in the way that the Apple Store kind of transformed retail experience on many levels, and online buying and shopping changed the retail experience. I feel like the welcome center experience is changing. What makes a really good welcome center right now in 2023?
Yeah, so talking about things that will never change is the people. It's good training, strong customer service. I think, again, I hate to keep going back to COVID, but it really changed everything. Is a lot of the students who were coming in had never worked before. They were missing some of those, soft skills that we saw traditionally students coming in with. And I think that admissions offices have seen that. And, if you go on a campus tour now versus maybe a couple years ago, it may feel like a different experience. And so really pushing and supporting your students to get there. They have it in them. We trained our ambassadors extensively and really showed them the why of why their work was so impactful and the difference that they were making. So that student to student connection is something that's never going to go away and has to be at the forefront. The other piece is, we had some really cool digital things in our Welcome Center. We had a virtual map that students and families could touch and click on. We had a timeline, a history timeline that they could click and learn the history of Old Dominion University. They could click and watch videos, those Student Bridge videos that I was telling you about. They could click on those and watch these 1-minute videos in our Welcome Center. And so that is something, again, a few years ago, I would have never seen anything like that, maybe in a museum, but never in a university Welcome Center, that I think, really universities are starting to level up. They're starting to see, okay, these are what those flagship schools have, and this is what we need to invest in. And a lot of things too that have started to shift is, we did outsource, but as I was leaving, we started realizing this is something that we can actually run and operate in-house with our IT department. So I think even if you're a smaller school, even if you're someone with less resources, talking to your IT department and see what can you do in-house to really create a great experience for your guests. I mean, even before we had this fancy touch screen, every guest who came into our Welcome Center, we had just a PowerPoint presentation, but it looked really fancy, of students' names as they came in, welcoming them to campus. And so even if you don't have the budget for kind of those big flashy things, if you have a TV screen, there's a lot that you can do to kind of enhance that visitor experience.
Really
The other thing,
that experience, that's
yes. Yeah. And I think that another piece that is not thought of as intentionally are those print pieces that students receive when they come into a Welcome Center, and making sure that that piece is special and unique for their visit, right? Is this something that they can hang up on their wall when they get home? Is it something that's visually attractive? Is it something that is different than maybe they received in the mail? Is it something different and giving them new information than what they received at a table at a counselor fair? So making sure that, again, that on-campus visitor experience print piece that you're giving them, that deliverable, is something special that they're going to walk away with. And then the last thing, and this is something that, this is not new to visitor centers, but this is something that is just really special that we always did. And that was a handwritten thank you letter to every visitor who came straight from their campus ambassador. And that is something pre-COVID, post-COVID, we still continue to do. And, that was something that we always heard, this is the only thank you letter I got for visiting, as specific as, good luck with your major, with your biology major, wherever you choose to attend. And so those personalized details really makes a difference and sets you apart.
I say this, I speak to folks from a lot of institutions, and this is always my advice is some of the most successful admissions practitioners out there today, and enrollment marketers, are just making really good use of what they got. And to your point, if all you got is a TV screen, what can you do with that? How can you personalize? How can you move on up to what your on-campus resources can get you and so forth? It's what you can do with what you got that really seems to make a difference. And yeah, that personalization thing, it can be a little tough to scale, but when it's done right, it's really crucial. So
yeah, Yeah, and we made adjustments, right? If it was high school spring break, we would do a postcard where, maybe it was a general message, but our campus ambassador would sign it, right? Because when you have thousands of students visiting in a 2-week period, writing handwritten notes just was not attainable for us. So, we switched to a postcard model. So if you're a visitor center who has a really high volume year round, maybe something like a postcard is a good option as well. The other thing I forgot to mention as well, and I know a lot of our partners have this as well, as visit days. We got visit days my last few years there, and it has that great CRM integration. And whether it's visit days or another platform, or if you can even do it through your CRM, automated text check-in, automated surveys right after the visit, those were all really key things that helped informed our campus visit experience. Our survey completion rate, tripled in some cases, and our actual attendance rate improved significantly as well. We were able to better plan the size of our events. There was no 30-40% attendance rate. It was always 80% or above when you have tools like that. So I think thinking about where to spend dollars and resources, that's going to save you in the long run for catering, for space reservations, and things like that. So thinking about the big picture through the full cycle is really important.
Well, Leslie Sharpe, marketing strategist here at Vision Point and a fellow higher ed lifer, really appreciate you joining us today for today's installment of Rock Enroll, the enrollment marketing podcast from Vision Point Marketing. I'm Dana Cruikshank, vice president here at Vision Point. And if you have any questions about anything we've discussed or would like to go in depth further, you can reach out to us at info@visionpointmarketing.com. Again, that's info@visionpointmarketing.com. Other than that, have a great day and a great start to this academic year. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Thank you.